exam 3 covering part 3, exam 4 covering part 4, and the quizzes part 4, deadline not this Friday, but next Friday, April 26th, and end of day, so 59:59 p.m. And exam number 5, the final covering all things, deadlines at during finals week at the end of the normal final time, but it's available online. To see if you need exam 5, because if you haven't done it, it's put in as 0, but it's already counting the grade at this point. You can look at your overall grade. If it's already an A, you're done, because you can't get more A than A. If it's less than an A, then you can get the grade estimator, plug in your best 3 exams, put a hypothetical 100 for the final, put in your overall quiz grade, paper grade, and then compare that overall grade to your real overall grade. And if it's a letter grade or more better, then the final could be worth doing. And again, not taking it would leave your grade exactly the same. Taking it will either leave your grade the same or possibly improve it, but it may not improve it a letter grade or more. For the paper, if you've done the paper, you're done. If you haven't done the paper, there's still the desperation deadline, April 26th for the half credit. And of course, half of something better than all of nothing, unless it's death, and it's better than half of that. Or taxes, rather pay half of that. Okay, before pressing on to finish up our living friend, me, talking about the moral status, test the moral status of artificial beings, anything about any previous stuff, or stuff to be that needs more stuff. Okay. So last time we're looking at our good dead friend Immanuel Kant, talking about testing the status of things, and we're looking at the example of our good dead friend Hitchbot. And so the question is, in the case of Hitchbot, he clearly doesn't have, it's just a phone and a shell, so how do we work this out? Well, as we saw with Kant's moral view, he sort of sneaks in, smuggles in duties to animals. We owe nothing to animals directly, and I use the analogy of like, the practice CPR dummies or the shoot scenarios, where we don't owe anything to a CPR dummy because it's just plastic and rubber and stuff. But if a person screws around in their CPR training, they're likely to hurt real people to whom we have obligations. So what we need to do is argue that in the case of animals, we want to show that they're, in his argument, they're more like us than they are rocks. So they get this status because they can make us feel. Now, even our good dead friend Descartes, who we looked at, he says animals don't have minds, they don't think, but he does agree they have life and the feels. And so even if they are but things, they would be special sorts of things that can feel. But then we get, of course, to the challenge of, but how do we apply this to artificial beings? Because as we've seen, people often have robo-racism, where they think that just because something's mechanical, that it can't have the feels, or can't count. So we can solve it in this way. Now, in the case of Descartes' argument, we saw Descartes thinks people wrongly think the animals have minds because of that argument by analogy. They seem to be like us, we have minds, animals have minds. Our good dead friend Bertrand Russell, we looked at as well, he also basically stole the argument by analogy, repainted it a little bit, put a British accent on it, and essentially did the same thing, that it's other people are like you think and feel, they think and feel. And we can, kind of make that into an argument for the case of animals. The more they're like us, the more we become habituated to thinking of them as being like us in other ways. Now, this is where the psychology comes into play. Our good dead friend Aristotle was Greek, student of Plato, teacher of Alexander the Great, died, still totally dead today. In his work on ethics, he argued that we become what we do. So if you want to be brave, do brave things. If you want to be kind, do kind things. His teacher, our good dead friend Plato, student of Socrates, teacher of Aristotle, and also dead guy, in his arguments in the Republic, he claims that art is corrupting, because if we're exposed to tragedy, we become prone to weeping. If we're exposed to comedy, we become inclined to play the fool, ever exposed to violence or prone to violence. And you might recognize that last argument is something people bring out every time there's, like a shooting. They'll say, oh, they were influenced by video games or movies. And tragically, this is the 20th anniversary of the Columbine shootings, 20 years ago, I think today. Wow, that was a long time ago. Now, we could argue that the same thing will hold in the case of animals. They can sway us emotionally. Instead of having a corrupting effect, well, if we're treating them badly, having a corrupting effect, but if we're treating them well, have a positive effect. So we can take that and utilize that in the argument. So in the case of Hitchbottom, going back to our good dead friend, as we saw, essentially Hitchbottom was a plastic shell with an iPhone stuck into it, and so he doesn't have any, well, calling it it doesn't have any moral status. It's a phone in a shell. But of course, when Hitchbottom was murdered in Philadelphia, people were outraged and upset. So, why? Well, he himself had no status, but because he made us feel, because of this, that it gave him this ersatz, this virtual status, not because of what he had, because he's just a phone in a plastic shell, but because of how he made us feel. So, we could say in the case of artificial beings, the same would apply. So if they, like in the case of Hitchbottom, can make us feel, we have obligations to them, not because they've got anything going on, perhaps, but because of what effect it would have on us to be mean to them. So if we're cruel to Hitchbottom, we can become cruel to people. So even if we can't answer the question, does the robot actually feel? Well, if you have someone who's mean to the robots at work, they're probably going to be a jerk to people too. You may not know if the robots have the feels or the thinks, but it will corrupt them. And so you could argue, even if you don't believe robots have the feels, you can still make the argument they should be treated well, because of the corruption of the person. So, it would end up with this ersatz, moral status. Now we still run into that problem I raised before, namely, what about cases of conflict? What if you're in the scenario like the nuclear plant example? You're the director of a nuclear power plant, there's an accident, oops, and you gotta send someone down to, shut down the reactor, or it just goes up. And you have to choose between, Andy the android or Andy the human. Now, if we don't have a reason to think that Andy has feelings, that he just has his ersatz status, then yeah, Andy should be sent, because, again, going back to the epistemic problem, we would know Andy the human is a human with human status, but in the case of Andy, we don't know. So Andy gets sent. So what's the ultimate conclusion? Now, basically 3 points. One, sorting out the status of artificial beings in the future will be, of course, challenging, but can be done, because we've done it before. Secondly, what if people suffer from robo-racism and refuse to grant? They say it's just a machine, you pop it open, doesn't matter how smart it seems, it doesn't matter how much it seems to feel. If you were to find out that, imagine you work with someone for years and years, and they're a friend, they come over for dinner, etc. Then one day they get hit by, there's an accident at work, their head gets popped open, you realize, oh my God, they're a robot all along. And a robo-racist would say, well, they don't have any status, they can fool me all this time. Now, even if we accept the view of the robo-racist, that just because something's a machine and can't have any thinking or feeling, we could still at least give them this ersatz status, that someone might say, that is someone at work and they're always mean to the robots. A person could say, well, it'd still be wrong to do, even for the robo-racist, because it'll make them a worse person. They'll be a robo-racist, and they'll probably be bad to people too. And so the ersatz status, as an old saying goes, is better than And so this provides a potential guide to that problem of the future. How do we know when beings have a moral status? Oh, it won't matter in 2024 because they kill us all. So there we go. Before pressing on to our next stuff, any stuff about this from our good living friend me that needs more? Yep, still on. Gotta check. Anything that needs any more stuff? We now turn to the much feared and dreaded problem of induction. Now, on the one hand, this is something when we encounter, we say, that's clearly BS. How can this even be a problem? But then when we sort of look at how it works, then we quickly find out, wait, everything that we do and believe has no foundation. This is terrifying. And then we take Hume's advice. We just forget about it, go about our business. So, what is induction? Well, we saw it back in the beginning of the semester, kind of formal. The idea is that when you use induction, you take premises, you reason to a conclusion where you only have probability. You lack certainty. And the reason why is because you're leaping beyond your evidence, beyond what you observe to what you haven't observed. Now, it's often cast about going from the past to the future. But it's more accurately going from the observed to the unobserved. Because if you're doing a generalization, surveying how people, what people think, you're going, your sample and your target are in the same time. This is what the sample thought at this time, so that's what the people thought at that time. But we can go with the future thing, because that's the usual version. Namely, we go from what we observed in the past, and we look forward to the future, which explains lots of our behavior. So, for example, when you want to heat something up, you put it in a microwave. If you want to cool it down, you put it in the fridge. We never worry that if we put, if we put something in the fridge, that it's going to be cooked. Like, oh no, it's cooked. The fridge has cooked everything. And we don't think that if we put our popcorn in the microwave, the kernels to puppet, we don't think that we're going to take out a block of ice. And we just think everything's going to work the way it's always worked. And so we've got faith in this induction. And our good day friend Locke said, probability. That's how we got our life. We think this is how it's probably going to happen. And our science, basically how we do everything, is based on that. That's how we think everything works. That's why for lunch we eat things like sandwiches and pizzas and so forth, and we don't eat rocks and drain them, because we don't think that's going to be good for us. So good so far. Because this inductive reasoning is psychologically inescapable. We just do it. Now the problem though is, if someone calls it into question, good dead friends, the skeptics, or living friends, they raise the question of, but how do you know that tomorrow will be like today? How do you know the next time you place your leftover spaghetti in the microwave that it will warm up instead of being frozen or turning into a squirrel? That'd be perfect squirrel. Well, just 5 more minutes, maybe terrible. So how do we prove that? How do we argue that this is, good reasoning? And why do we assume that the future will be like now and like the past? Now, it seems like something that should be super easy to do, because we all have complete faith that, with some notable exceptions, things won't change. We expect the sun to warm us tomorrow. We expect microwaves to warm things. We expect refrigerators to cool things. We expect gravity to still be working. We expect that you should stay away from cars. If you get hit by one, it hurts a bunch. We expect this all to continue. We have no doubts. Now, we do have, of course, some cases where things do change. For example, there was once an ice age. That changed. We don't have that now. And so we're aware that, yeah, the future is not always going to be like the past, but in general, we think, yeah, it's going to be pretty consistent. And we're so confident that we don't even think, but how do we know? And of course, philosophers always ruin everything by saying, but how do you know? Now, as you might imagine, our good dead friend David Hume, who drank a lot and did a lot of drinking and a lot of thinking, kind of the Lannister of his day, without the murdery stuff, 1711 to 1776, he's the guy that's credited with this problem. Was he the first person to truly do it? Maybe not. Maybe someone else did it long ago, but he's the person we've got the earliest writings from. And here's the problem. In Hume speak, if you take any matter of fact, as you might recall from the ancient days when we talked about Hume, a matter of fact is something about the world. So if you take something like the backpack is on the table, microwaves warm food, the sun, well, the earth revolves around the sun, you can deny all of those and not generate a contradiction. So if I say, you know, obviously, like I say the backpack's not on the table, that's easy. You just pick it up and, you know, true. But something like microwaves warm things, I could deny that. Microwaves don't. You would say that I'm wrong. I don't understand microwaves, but it's not a contradiction. There's no logical error there. You couldn't just do, like, if someone didn't know what a microwave was, they couldn't just do, like, some logic and say, oh yes, they must warm things. Now, in contrast, the truths of reason, like triangles have three sides, bachelors are unmarried, it's never a contradiction to deny those matters of fact. So if I say triangles don't have three sides, impossible, or impossible, but, or inconceivable. But if I say that, you know, the Patriots won't win the Super Bowl next year, or the Patriots will win the Super Bowl next year, there's no contradiction. We know one of them's going to be true. They will or they won't, but we don't know which one's going to be true. And to say they won't win it doesn't create a logical contradiction. So that's kind of the foundation of the problem. Anything that's a matter of fact, that microwaves warm things, that water boils at a certain temperature, that the spleen holds blood, that the pancreas creates insulin, you could deny all of those. I mean, they'd be factually correct, but it would not be a contradiction. So why is that a problem? Well, the problem is justifying extending stuff to the future. Namely, what justifies our belief that what's going on now will occur in the future? Now, what we typically would say if someone raised such a silly question, we'd probably talk about our beliefs in causal laws, like the laws of science. So if someone said, hey, tomorrow if you jumped off a building, would you fall? And someone would say, well, yeah, obviously, because of gravity, and you can do some equations, etc. And so we think that we have all these causal laws, and we've got it sorted out. But then, as a skeptic always does, they can say, but how do you know the causal laws will work tomorrow? How do you know as little often anyone knows that the sun will come up tomorrow? Perhaps she was wrong. Well, we base our reasoning concerning cause and effect, at least according to our good dead friend David Hume, on experience. But then we can raise the question, what do we base our reasoning on experience upon? And here's where he gets the problem going. Anytime we argue by experience, so if someone said, hey, if I jump off the building tomorrow, well, will I fall? And of course people would say, yes. Yes, you will. Why? And the person says, well, why? How do I know? Well, they would say, well, the causal laws about gravity. Well, how do you know gravity's a thing? How do you know that it's going to do its thing? Well, people would argue from experience. Every time you drop something, it's falling. And then here's where the finishing move comes in. Namely, the basis of that would be you believe in the causal law because it's happened in the past, and you believe that the future will be like the past. But of course the question is, how do I know the future will be like the past? And the reply is, because, it's happened before. But then one would say, how do I know it's going to keep going? Now, if someone persisted in that, if there was someone like standing outside our Tucker Hall saying, should I jump off it tomorrow? Will I be able to, fly like, Thor or, like Captain Marvel? You'd say no. And if they started talking about the problem, saying, well, how do I know it's going to keep going? You would think them, as Hume would say, a fool or a lunatic. So we think this is just, crazy talk. But the challenge is, how do we prove that it would just be crazy talk? Well, what we try to do is refer to our experience. And this is, again, human, doing as human. What experience shows us is that, this is what we experienced in the past, and that in the past, this occurred. And when a similar thing happens, now, present, or thinking about the future, we expect that it will be the same. Again, going back to the simple microwave example. Put the popcorn in the microwave, close the door, push the buttons, and popcorn emerges. And the reason we think that'll happen this time is because it's happened before. Then the question is that Hume raises is, well, what justifies that? How does that work? So here's how we reason. I've always found the microwave, except when it's not plugged in or broken, it always warms stuff up. Therefore, I reason from that to the microwave will always, unless it's broken or not plugged in, will always warm things up in the future microwave. So how do I prove that? We all believe it. We wouldn't stare at the microwave going, I wonder if it'll work this time. And then put something in and try it. Go, I wonder about this time. That would be crazy. But, as Hume argues, it's not intuitive, it's not just a truth of reason, nor is it demonstrative. To say that it's experiential, as he points out, is circular reasoning. Because our inferences about experience already assume the future will be like the past. And so, if we argue from experience to prove this, we're just running in a circle. So if someone says, someone raises the question, they see the microwave, they're like, it's heating my burrito today. How do I know that it will heat my burrito tomorrow? Now, if you think the person is concerned that because their microwave is failing, you might just say, well, maybe it won't, maybe it'll break down. But if the person says, no, my question is, in the future, shall the same microwave still cook the burrito, or will the causal rules change? Will then become like a burrito cooler? And if you say no, because it's always cooked burritos before, the person would say, no, it's always cooked my burritos before. My question is not what did it do before, but what will it do in the future? Now, to do something somewhat less weird, think about trust in other people. The reason why you trust other people is because they have not betrayed you in the past. So you infer, Game of Thrones style, that they have not betrayed you then, so they'll be loyal next time. But if you watch like Game of Thrones, how far does loyalty go? Or if you live in this world, is loyalty always guaranteed? No. Past loyalty or past failure to betray doesn't guarantee future loyalty. So the person who's always been faithful in the past, when they get that key point, when they can seize the throne or betray you to get the money, they might do it. And so it is a fair question to say, how do more sensibly? Because if you say will my microwave heat my burrito tomorrow? That seems silly. But if you say, if you're in this contentious political battle, how do I know my political ally today will be my ally tomorrow? How do I know the person I trust today that I can trust them tomorrow? which is a more reasonable question. And if we simply say, if the person says, but I've been loyal to you in the past, well, that doesn't answer the question about tomorrow. So according to our good dead friend David Hume, our belief that the future will be like the past, that yesterday tells us of tomorrow, is based on the belief that nature is uniform, which is based on our past experience. And as he argues, this doesn't justify extending to the future. So essentially what we're doing is, again, going back to the silly burrito case, every time you put the burrito in the microwave and it's not broken, it's plugged in, get a warm burrito. And we believe that's based on like these laws of microwaves and burrito heating, and we base that on experience. But if we try to argue that it's going to keep going to the future, it doesn't do it. So why not? Well, essentially what's laid forth is a dilemma. In this case, an argument by elimination. Hume and others like him contended there's basically two ways you can argue that we can know that the past will tell us of the future. One is deduction, going with a valid argument. If all premises are true, the conclusion must be true. Option two is, inductive argument. If all the premises are true, the conclusion is probably true. And the claim is that these are the only two options, so they both fail, there's no way to know. And Hume, of course, is going to make that argument. He's going to say all the options essentially are deduction, induction, they both fail, so we cannot have no faith in the past tells us of the future. So what about the deductive path? Well, suppose a reason like this. Premise one, the uniform nature was reliable in the past. Conclusion, it will be reliable in the future. Now I can use a concrete example. The microwave has, has heated my burrito in the past, so it'll continue to do so in the future. Or little finger has proved loyal in the past, so it'll be loyal in the future. I think he's dead now, at least in the current spoilers. I guess everybody dies. Spoiler, everybody dies. And T.R. Martin's like, kill them all so I don't write more books. And not a bad plan. I mean, HBO would just leave him alone. So, actually, it is over. It's over. He's done with the books. Now, the problem is, at least according to the analysis, is this. This would not be a deductive argument. Why not? Well, one hallmark of deduction is, that they put forth is, the conclusion is already contained within the premises. And again, containment is a mysterious metaphor, but the idea is that when you engage in deduction, there is no leap. In a way, you're doing like an analysis of what's already there. I mean, the easy example is the day of the week argument. If today is Thursday, tomorrow's Friday, premise two, today is Thursday, tomorrow's Friday, there's no leap. That tomorrow is Friday is already contained in those premises. Now, in this case, we're making a jump, and we're engaged in inductive reasoning, which is defined this way. Kind of the older, more archaic definition of it is that inductive arguments are amplitive. That's to say, there's more in the conclusion than there is in the premises. You're leaping from what you've observed to what you haven't. So, whereas the day of the week argument's deductive, if today is Thursday, tomorrow's Friday, if today is Thursday, tomorrow's Friday, arguments like, generalizations like surveys. We've got the election coming up in 2020, so you're already doing surveys about the chances of various candidates. So someone might say that, say, Bernie Sanders has, say, 52% of Democrats say they'll vote for him. You have those sampled. And what we do is we leap beyond to the whole population and say, 52% of all Democrats would vote for him. Or making a leap. So even if our premises are true, our conclusion could still get it wrong, because we're going from what we've observed to what we have not. And so this argument isn't a deductive argument. Or so is claimed. And it does seem that it's, yeah, not. So, kind of the argument as to why it can't be deductive, the deductive argument doesn't work is because, pretty straightforward, it's not deductive. So it can't work because it's not even deductive. So what if we try really hard? Well, here's why even trying really hard is not going to work. So suppose we try to justify the principle of induction. That the future will generally be like the past. That past performance is an indicator of future performance. Well, in order to work this argument, to make it a sound deductive argument, we have to know the premises are true. But here's the problem. Do we know the future? Sadly, no. Or maybe it's good we don't. So the premises we use must be confined to the present and the past. So we can't say what will happen. We can only say what has happened and what is happening. So, if we're going to have a valid deductive argument, there can't be anything in the conclusion that's not already implicit in the premises. So, if we're going to build a sound deductive argument where we know the premises are true, the premises must only contain past or present, not the future. So, as long as you use inductive logic, or so the argument goes, we can never have premises about the future, and our argument can never take us beyond our premises, so a deductive argument can never take us from the past or the present to the future, or so the argument goes. So, by the very nature of deduction itself, the claim is it's trapped in the past, or the present, or so they claim. So Hume and others that agree with him claim, again, only ways to support this are deduction, induction, and they believe deduction fails. One is that one approach is the argument itself just can't be deductive, so it can't work. The other is that essentially, again, it can't be deductive because the premises have to be about the past and present, and our conclusion has to be about the future. But with deductive arguments, we can't do that leap, so it can never be a sound deductive argument. So deduction, he claims, is out. But maybe induction can save us. Before being sadly disappointed by induction, anything about deduction and its sad disappointment. That means more sad disappointment. Now, suppose we try the other option, inductive arguments. And we reason like this. Well, induction, of course, is not deduction, so it doesn't give us certainty. But it's had a high probability of success, so probably it'll keep on working. But then here's the problem. What justifies the leap from inductions worked in the past to the future? Now, if we do it by saying it's justified by nature being uniform, then we raise the question, how do we know that? And essentially we're going back to induction. So what we'd be saying is, if we use an inductive argument, namely saying it's worked in the past, so it'll work in the future, we're using induction. But the problem is, of course, that our problem is, how do we know that induction works? That we can go from the past to the future. And if we assume that we can, to prove we can, we're engaged in circular logic. So that fails. So, if we try a deductive argument, we end up with either it's not a deductive argument at all, or it just ends up, failing, not being a sound argument. If we use an inductive argument, we end up running in a circle, which also fails. If these are the only two options, then fail. Or so the argument goes. So at this point, we have not established induction, at least according to Hume and his supporters. So what happened after David Hume? Well, most philosophers believed he was correct. There's no deductive way to establish induction. Now, this of course doesn't mean that it's impossible, because obviously, sort of ironically, to say that we're sure that the future will bring no deductive proof of induction would be to claim we have solved the problem of induction. So what have people tried to do? Well, essentially there's been a few approaches. One approach has been to try to use inductivism, basically another level of induction, to try to solve the problem. And this is done by Frederick Will. And through a metaphor. He has a metaphor of a contained expanse moving to new territory. For higher order inductivism will thus establish lower order induction. So kind of his faith was, if we can get the right kind of inductivism going, we can solve the problem for the problem of induction. Or so he claims. Another approach, the one we probably tend to do ourselves, is pragmatic. This one put forth by Hans Reichenbach. And he claimed, essentially, in a very Lockean move, the principle of induction is the only option we've got. If it doesn't work, nothing will. So, in a way, it's not an argument as to refute the skeptic, like they would actually know. Basically what he's saying is, well, that's all we got. And what else are you going to do? Just not make predictions? You're just going to stare at the microwave, wondering will it warm your burrito or not, and then die of starvation? Well, no, we're going to put the burrito in the microwave and hope that it works. So the second one is one most of us tend to do. We just sort of pragmatically don't worry about it and just say, well, if it doesn't work, nothing will, so we're just gotta use it. Peter Strawson also tried a third argument, namely a dissolution argument. And similar in many ways, but at least in spirit, to the one that we saw with Chisholm. Namely, he claims to even engage on this problem is a mistake, because it's trying to justify what's presupposed by justification itself. So essentially it's trying to say that even engaging with this is something we shouldn't do. And so the general consensus seems to be deductive argument's not going to solve it. But again, of course, you can't say for sure, because that would mean you've solved the problem of induction. And the attempt's supposed to have made either in terms of trying to make the inductive argument work, or trying to give a pragmatic argument that's the only game, or saying, well, this is a mistake to even engage, so we'll just kind of use it. And so that's where the problem of induction kind of stands. Can we turn to the ethics of belief? Now, with the questions about the other minds, the question was, how do we know that people, that other things think and have the fields? And the problem of induction, the question is, how do we know that the future will resemble the past? And now we turn to the question of ethics of belief. And this is where morality merges with epistemology. So here are some questions that create these problems. One question is this. When it comes to believing stuff, do we have an actual moral obligation to believe things based on the evidence that supports them? Namely, what sort of duties exist in the case of believing? What are our epistemic obligations? I mean, to use some concrete examples. Think about, well, we could take controversial, let's use the controversial stuff. We could take one like the anti-vax movement. Now, defenders of the anti-vax movement often say they refer to their own experts, and they claim they have a right to believe what they want to believe. They have a right to this belief. And this is a question of the ethics of belief. Do people have the right to believe what they believe about vaccines, that they, in that case, they cause autism? Or are they obligated to believe based on the degree that evidence actually supports them? In other words, if they say I have a right to believe what I want, is the correct response to them, no, you don't. You only have a right to believe things that are adequately supported by evidence. Or as another example, in politics, people often believe stuff in politics, believe theories about like how taxes work or the economy works, etc. And if challenged, then people often say, well, that's just what I believe. And a fair question would be, do they have the right to just believe that, or are they obligated to actually go and check the facts, before just believing it? And so the general challenge here is this. Are there moral obligations when it comes to belief? Do we have to go and actually, as the first question says, go and make sure that our beliefs are founded by proper evidence? And we actually have to do our homework to be able to believe stuff. And so if someone just believes like a conspiracy theory or believes a politician that they're acting wrong with it, that they should actually go and check. So for example, if someone believes what Donald Trump says or what Elizabeth Warren says, just because they really like Trump or they really hate Trump or really like Warren or really hate Warren, is that good enough? Or are they obligated to actually go and check on this stuff? Now, one fundamental question here is this. If we talk about duties and responsibilities, that would generally imply that it's something we can do. So if somebody can't do something, it would be odd to say they have a duty to do so, a duty to do something they cannot possibly do. And so we have to consider the question, is believing something we control? Is it within our power? Which is a good question. So, for example, we'll take the vaccine controversy. Is it the case that if you're a pro-vaccine person, is it the case that you sat down, went through all of the evidence about vaccines, read the literature, looked at the experiments and studies and said, aha, I make myself believe in vaccines. They are generally safe and effective. And is it the case that people who are anti-vaxxers, they look at the one discredited article, they listen to the celebrities who are anti-vaccine talking about it, and they say, yes, on the basis of this, I choose to be anti-vaxxer. Or like in politics, does someone listen to Donald Trump, saying his stuff and say, yes, I believe that all this is true. And someone who believes in Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, they listen to what they say, look at the stuff and say, yes, I choose to believe. Now, if we can choose our beliefs, then that would be something that we could talk about in terms of our obligations. I mean, to use an analogy, when we're driving, we have a duty not to like run over people, not hit them with our car, because it's something we can do. But we don't have an obligation, morally, to things that we can't do. So, for example, do you have an obligation to not hit someone who suddenly jumps in front of you before you can even react? And the answer is, well, no, because built right into it is they jump in front of you before you can even react, and you have no obligation to do something you can't possibly do. And so a key question here is, do we choose our beliefs? Or are they, forced on us? Do we just believe them, or do we pick them? Now this could be seen, and maybe pushing the analogy a bit, it's kind of like a gender identity, the question of sexual orientation. One of the questions there that people have been debating is, do you, on one side, people claim that you pick it. You just like, I guess one day, you're going through your preferences in your brain or something, you just like click the boxes, I suppose. Or is it the case that you just are, born that way? That's just what you are, you don't choose it. Now, in the case of beliefs, we obviously have like lots and lots of beliefs as opposed to like, lots and lots of identities. But it's a similar sort of question. Do we just believe? For example, is someone just an anti-vaxxer or just a Trump supporter, or are they consciously choosing? They go through and pick. I believe this, I don't believe that. So the general question is, what is the relationship between our will and our belief? Can we make ourselves believe stuff? Could we, for example, suppose someone is an anti-vaxxer, or a Trump supporter, or a white nationalist, or a liberal, or a socialist, or a pro-vaxxer. Could they make themselves change their belief? Could someone go from being anti-vax to vax by a matter of choice? Could they say, well, I'm anti-vax because I believe they're harmful? Could they go and do all kinds of research and then say, well, the research shows that I'm wrong, so my belief has changed? Or like in politics. Could someone be ranting on Facebook about Trump, and could someone convince them that Trump is correct? So, a fundamental question. Can we will ourselves to have beliefs? Or, perhaps it's, is it more indirect? Could you sort of want to change and then go through like a process that would bring that about? For example, take the example of someone who's like a white nationalist. They're a pretty well-known person who was like a big figure in white nationalism, and then eventually he stopped and changed. But of course it wasn't like over, it wasn't like instantly. And so it may be the case that someone, if they want to stop being like a white nationalist, they're not just going to wake up and say, no, not this anymore. And maybe they have to go through like this slow process of change. To use the obvious analogy, it's kind of like if someone wants to exercise, they want to run a marathon. It's not like they can get up and just one morning and say, well, marathon ready, click, I'm ready to go. Just do that tomorrow. You have to go through this long process of training. And maybe beliefs are a similar sort of thing. You want to believe something, but it may take quite a while to bring that about. So kind of the fundamental questions are we more obligated to believe or not believe certain things? Is it more okay to believe things that are false? Do we have a right to believe whatever we want? Or can we criticize people for beliefs and say they are wrong for believing that? And this, of course, ties into the question of, just like with all moral issues, how free are we to choose our beliefs? Or do we just believe what we do, and there's nothing we can do about it? Or is the case that we can do something about it, but it might be like a very slow process, like getting ready for a marathon or some other similar thing. Now, there are some folks who believe that we do have what are called epistemic duties. And these are duties to believe. Now, the usual view is based on the evidence. Namely, that what we're supposed to do is this, that if the best evidence supports a claim, we have a moral obligation to believe that. Or, at the very least, that we have an obligation morally to essentially train ourselves to be critical thinkers, so we'll probably have justified beliefs. And it's a good question, you know. If someone just believes and they're not basing it on the best evidence, and they're not, you know, sort of train themselves to be, you know, critical thinkers about stuff, are they acting in a way that's morally wrong? I mean, you could criticize them obviously by saying, well, they're believing things that are not well supported, they're not very good thinkers, but could you say that they are therefore failing, they are therefore bad people? Now, Locke has the following view. We'll see more of Locke in the future. How can you tell if a person actually loves the truth? Well, here's the test. If they love the truth, they don't believe anything beyond the evidence available for it, which it does seem pretty sensible. So they're a person who is committed to the truth, only believes to the degree that that is supported. Beyond that, you know, they would not accept it. Now this, of course, is practically important today. We think, for example, to the disinformation campaign in 2016, and the one that's going on today, and the one that's going to, of course, go on in 2020. Think about, like, the voters. When people go to decide who's going to be president, whether it be President Trump or President Democrat, whichever one wins it out, are people obligated to, you know, be critical about this, to go and do their homework, to verify their sources, or do people have no obligation to do that? Now, someone like Locke would probably say it's a moral failing. If someone just goes out and votes and they're getting sucked into, you know, all these, you know, misleading ads and conspiracies, and they're not being critical, just believe whatever they're told, you know, the argument can be made they're bad people. They're moral failures because they're not checking their beliefs. So one view on this is that we are morally obligated. We would be bad people. Not just like epistemically, you know, not just like poor thinkers or bad at, you know, epistemology. We would be bad people if we don't believe based on the available evidence. So the claim is there's actually something morally wrong to not believe based on the evidence. Now this fellow Clifford, not the big red dog, sadly, because that'd be kind of cool. Epistemology with dogs and better epistemology. He has a fairly extreme claim. He claims it is wrong always, everywhere and for anyone, to believe anything upon insufficient evidence, which is pretty extreme. So, you know, using the example of, say, the upcoming election, if people are, you know, as will probably happen, people are getting on social media, they're getting off on these, you know, fake news websites, and they're just, you know, believing all this stuff, like, you know, fake claims about Trump, fake claims about whoever the Democratic candidate is, you know, fake claims about all this stuff. Clifford would say if they're believing it and the evidence is insufficient, they are bad people. They're not just being like sloppy thinkers or careless thinkers or, you know, doing bad logic. They are bad people. Now, regardless of who they're supporting, you know, he wouldn't be like, you know, okay, if they're from, you know, on my side, that's okay. If they're on the other side, it's bad. Even if they turned out to be right by chance, they would still be wrong because they're not doing it based on evidence. They'd just be doing it for some other reason. So is Clifford, the non-big red dog, is he right about that? Is a person a bad person if they believe something They don't have evidence for it. Also, like if they're on Facebook in 2020 and someone believes something, it's fake news, and would you say, well, what's your evidence for it? They say, I haven't got any, but I believe it. Would you be right to say you are a morally wrong person? Because that would change the minds. That always works. Well, Clifford would definitely think so. So what could these duties be, and how could they be justified? Well, one approach, not surprisingly, is to look at it pragmatically or prudentially. Now, interestingly enough, or morally enough, when I teach the critical thinking class, I differentiate between logical reasons to believe, which would be reasons to believe based on actual evidence. So if you have a good argument with plausible premises, then you have a logical reason to believe the conclusion. But I also note that there can be pragmatic reasons to believe. For example, when I go over, there's a fallacy called appeal to fear, or sometimes called scare tactics. And the idea is that what a person does is offers in place of evidence something that's supposed to threaten or scare the target so they will believe it. And if someone like suddenly bursts through the door wearing a blue suede shoes and an Elvis jumpsuit, carrying a sequined AK-47, and said, do you believe that Elvis is coming back to the moon for a special show this weekend? The thing to do, of course, would just say, but of course, because they've got a gun. But once they've been subdued and taken away, we, of course, would have no reason to believe that. In fact, there isn't one to begin with. But of course, there can be pragmatic reasons to believe things out of fear of being killed or shot. So, for example, to use a real and terrifying example, when ISIS was taking over parts of the Middle East, many of the people there, I'm sure, didn't believe in what ISIS believed. But of course, they had very pragmatic reasons to go along, because otherwise they would be killed. Or a final pragmatic example, there's a fallacy called bandwagon. It's where people believe something just because it's winning. The person is the winning candidate, the plan's winning. And of course, the person can have a pragmatic reason to go along because it's winning. But of course, logically, that's not proof. To say, okay, this plan is winning, doesn't mean it's good. It could be a terrible, terrible plan. But interestingly enough, some philosophers, who are pretty sure are all dead now, they, not because of his, probably other reasons, they advance the notion of pragmatic duties, namely this. You believe not based on, say, the logic of it, is this good logic? You believe based on asking the following question. Does this, believing this, give me the best results? Examples of this include our good dead friend David Hume, our good dead friend Mill, our good dead friend James, who's the brother of James, the famous author, and of course the famous philosopher you've probably heard of, Price, hold this view. Now we saw with Hume, his view was this. When it came to the senses, he said, well, can you ever know? He says, no, you can't. So what do? Well, go get a beer. Eventually you drink enough, you won't care anymore. You just go back to everyday stuff, problem solved. Price's argument was this. He claims, even if we were rational all the time, which is quite a jump, there's still nothing wrong, morally, about accepting things unreasonable. Either going against the evidence, like, yeah, there's all this evidence for this, but I believe it, or simply just not considering evidence at all. I just believe it, I'm not even gonna look. I mean, good examples would be, again, like political beliefs, religious beliefs, beliefs that are ideological, where people believe against all the evidence. For example, well, it'll always be controversial stuff. For example, the flat earth folks. All the evidence is the earth is not flat. given Price's view, maybe it's okay for them to do this, to believe against the evidence. And of course, there are people who believe without considering evidence at all. Often religious beliefs are like that. People don't believe typically because they went out and did all this careful research about which is the correct faith and did all kinds of experiments to see how the universe works. They just kind of believe it. They don't really looking for evidence. Now Price says, there's nothing wrong with this. Morally, we can't fault people. So then, why should we believe stuff that's true? Why not just believe, whatever? Well, this is where the pragmatics come in. He claims, if we believe against the evidence, or if we just believe stuff without just saying, I'm just going to believe it, I don't care about any evidence, I'm not going to look, his claim is, this will end up screwing us over in the long term. So, we have no moral reason to believe the truth, but we have a pragmatic one, namely this. It's in our long-term interest to believe stuff that's true rather than false stuff. So, if we believe reasonably, based on evidence, then we're more likely to be better off than if we don't. So very pragmatic. So, for example, we can take the example of the anti-vaxxers. They are going, against the evidence. All the good science says vaccines, although not without risk. If you get a vaccine, they'll always have you can do this stuff. But it's usually not as bad as what it prevents. Like the side effects of the measles vaccine, better than death, or the stuff that measles can bring. So Price would say, yeah, if you're an anti-vaxxer, there's nothing morally wrong with that. But he claims, why shouldn't you just believe against the evidence? Well, his claim is in the long term, it will just be bad. And we can illustrate this pretty easily with the anti-vax movement. What's the negative consequence of not believing in vaccines?
Getting sick.
Yeah, you get sick. Get measles, or a person doesn't vaccinate their kids, and their kids get the measles, and they're really sick and perhaps die. Yeah, so Price wouldn't say to the anti-vaxxers, you're morally wrong for believing this, but he would say that in the long term, that's a bad choice. Not morally bad, but pragmatically. So Price's view is very practical. Why should you believe true stuff? Or try to? Well, the reason is because you're going to be better off if you believe true stuff. Now, in a way, he's not giving any moral judgment like you're a bad person for doing this. He just says your things are not going to work out well. Now, this does, again, raise an interesting question about this. Would believing things that are untrue, will that generally end up badly? Think about politics. Many very successful political parties, many very successful political candidates, many successful products are based on things that are not true. And it seems to be working very, very well for them. And so the way you have to claim is that, in general, not every case, that believing false stuff would end in, disaster. Now, one thing that becomes kind of complicated is the question of, do we look at this in terms of the individual themselves, or we look at it in terms of consequences to others? So, for example, suppose you have someone in an administration who believes all kinds of faults like racist stuff, and they act upon this, constantly. Now, a person might say, well, acting upon all this false racist stuff will have terrible results, but is it that it would have terrible results for them or other people? Because you can imagine someone, they get through, they get into administration, they have all these terrible racist views, they implement them, all kinds of terrible stuff happens, but they're effectively fine. They get their big salary, they retire with their pension, they're really well off. And so it could be that they just never end up paying a price for having false beliefs. Now, Price might say, well, in that case, the person was just lucky, and in general, people would get caught up. But it is a fair point to raise. What if, someone could believe things that are false, that are really dangerous and terrible to other people, but they themselves will be fine? Namely, it gives them the best outcome. Well, you could counter that and say they have to consider other people as well. So I should believe things that are good for other people, but that seems to get us into, the ethics, the morality of, I should believe things that are true for the good of other people. So, the pragmatic view. So recap, the pragmatic view is this. You got no moral obligation to believe, stuff. But, if you believe stuff that's not true, in the long term, that's going to go badly. So, it's in your interest to believe true stuff rather than false stuff. So that would be the motivation. A pragmatic one as opposed to moral. So the ought here is pragmatic rather than ethical. Now, this makes the person's goals kind of relative or subjective to them. Namely, they might be after happiness, salvation, convenience, pleasure, but whatever they're picking as their victory conditions, the argument Price gives is that you're always better off, he claims, generally seeking the truth. Because whatever your goal is, you're more likely to achieve that with true beliefs than false ones. Or so he claims. So if your goal is, salvation through religion, the claim is you should still seek true beliefs because you're more likely to achieve it if you have these true beliefs, etc. Now, of course, this also would need to include a distinction between, obviously, what the person themselves believes and what they're getting other people to believe. So it could be in someone's self-interest, clearly, to not believe, their own lies, but to get other people to believe them, which would be a separate matter. Namely, this would be the ethics of telling the truth. Should you encourage people to believe what you yourself know to be false? Which is often, true in politics. The people who do the fake news, the people who lie, they typically know they're not telling the truth. And so they're trying to have true beliefs about it, but of course they want other people to have these false beliefs, which is kind of like another level of ethics of belief. Before pressing on, anything on this stuff that needs more stuff? So, the question of whether we ought to believe something for reasons raises the critical prior question about whether we can believe things just by will. Again, going back to my analogy, this could be seen similar to the debate over sexual orientation or gender. Is that something you pick, or you could just, the sort of mocking critics say you could just wake up and decide that you're going to be, a helicopter today, or is it something that you just are? Now, in this context, it's a question of, of particular beliefs. Is it the case that, to use an analogy to a computer, is it that we, metaphorically speaking, have like a big checklist in our brain, like with, believe, don't believe, option, where we just go through and kind of push the buttons? Or is it like those preferences that you don't get to control, that are, grayed out, that are set for you? So is it that the beliefs, you just have them, and you're sort of a victim of your beliefs, or are you the master of your beliefs where you get to pick, I believe, I don't believe, I believe. And there's also, of course, the other epistemic question of how can you tell? How do you know when you're picking your beliefs? Well, you can obviously say, I choose to believe, or, the scales fell from my eyes and I realized it was all a lie, but are we still really choosing? So what are the options here? Well, one camp is called volitionalism or voluntarism. Not in the sense that they're out there like helping people, picking up trash, building houses with Jimmy Carter, but in this idea that we have the volition to voluntarily pick our beliefs. So the idea is basically this. Going back to the metaphor, you can, metaphorically speaking, click the button. You have a little checkbox like, believe, click, yes. Now, if we do that, if we are in charge of picking our beliefs, this would seem to entail we do have obligations. Again, going back to the analogy of driving the car, if you're choosing where your car goes, you have more obligations there. Duties about like not hitting other people, or getting up on the sidewalk, or crashing into buildings, or running over animals, because we have the choice. Now, it may be thought that if we don't accept voluntarism, that we just choose our beliefs, that doesn't automatically entail that we don't have these duties. Why not? Well, even if we can't just, going back to the metaphor, just click, believe, don't believe, we may be able to influence our beliefs indirectly. I mean, they include some weird examples like hypnotism, autosuggestions, etc. But a more normal thing would be essentially going back to the metaphor of like, training for a marathon. Obviously, in the case of like being marathon ready, you can't just like wake up one day and just like, click and say, right, boom, suddenly I can run this mile, run that mileage. It's something you have to train towards. So you might say that in the case of our beliefs, maybe they're more like fitness than clicking preferences on a computer. Namely, you can't obviously just suddenly say, I want to be fit, and then just be fit. You have to go through this process. So someone could say, they have beliefs they don't like. Like, for example, someone's like really sexist or racist, and they're like, these beliefs are terrible. So they probably couldn't just like wake up one morning and say, oh, just turn that sexism off, turn that racism off, I'm good now. They probably have to go through a process. And so it may be that even though we can't directly, on and off switch our beliefs, we can shape who we are. We can, by doing certain things, acting certain ways, we can change how we believe. Now, a good dead friend, John Locke, takes a pretty strict approach. He argues, if something's against the light of reason, we should never believe it. And so he's a pretty strict voluntarist, namely, he believes we do have this control, at least in certain beliefs, and we're obligated to act upon that control. So voluntarism is the view that we can pick our beliefs. And even if you don't believe that we can, again, kind of like, preference click them, we could still accept that we can influence our beliefs. So we may not be able to like wake up one morning and say, whoop, I'm not going to be racist ever again, or I'm not going to be sexist ever again. A person could, change their beliefs over time. And the question there is, how much are we obligated to do this kind of stuff? Now, I also mentioned, we'll finish up with this, our good dead friend Clifford, who was born in 1845, died in 1879, and is still dead today. So what does he do? Well, first, he considers a roadblock to pragmatic justifications that are not fully supported by the evidence. So what does he think? Well, he argues for an ethics of belief in which if you believe something without sufficient evidence, then that's morally wrong. It's not just like epistemically bad, it's morally bad. What about the pragmatic justifications? Well, he claims that they are not justifications but are mere counterfeits, because the pragmatic justification is not at all. Now, looking at it from the standpoint of critical thinking and logic, Clifford's view in many ways is appealing. I gave the example of fallacies like scare tactics, bandwagon, etc. Oh, there's also another fallacy called peer pressure, where a person believes a claim because they're threatened by rejection from their peers if they don't accept it. And a person can have a practical reason to want to accept the claim to stay in the group, but of course, logically, that's a fallacy. And so from the standpoint of logic, Clifford does seem to be right. That just saying, well, it's useful to believe this or act this way, therefore I'm justified, one could argue, well, logically not. But again, of course, the counter-argument is logic's logic, you know, what matters is the pragmatic stuff. So if believing in, even though a particular ideology is false, if believing in it allows you to be, you know, to advance in a party and get power, well, you go for it, because what matters is like power. Okay, next week we'll finish up all of this stuff. So what remains is, of course, if we've done so already, Exam 3, Exam 4, quizzes part 4, deadline April 26th at end of day. The exciting final, Exam 5, deadlines at the normal time during finals week. And to see if you need the final, again, you can use a grade estimator, put in your best 3 exams, hypothetically for the final, paper grade, quiz grade, compare that to your overall grade. If it's better by 11 grade or more, the final could be worth it. And of course, if you already get an A, you're done, because you can't get more A than A.